Morning, Ned. Nice to meet you as well. I'm Stuart Dawks. I'm the CEO of Peterborough Environment City Trust, or PECT. We're an environment organisation working across a range of different areas, from natural environment, education, waste and responsible resource use, all the way through to sort of health and wellbeing initiatives as well.
I'd really like to ask you about the business model, and perhaps we could zoom in on just, I don't know, a few services, one or two of the things that you do, where I can ask you, what is the service, what problem it solves, who's it for, and any sort of financial information about how it works, how much you charge. That would be really interesting.
Yeah, certainly. So probably should have said a bit more about me. I don't come necessarily from the third sector background. Like a lot of people, I sort of fell into it. I came from a commercial background, and I was brought into the organisation about 8 years ago as a commercial manager to look at how the charity could diversify its income stream. And that was predominantly because the charity had been reliant on a single sort of source of income from a subsidiary company that was coming to an end. And so they were looking to see how they could capitalise on the skill set that we have within the charity and what that would look like going forward. Sort of fast forward 8 years, we're currently going through a bit of a change again. I became CEO about 8 months ago. And we're looking at how we can work more clearly with our audiences, because, as you said, we cover such a breadth of different projects. It's sometimes challenging for people to understand actually what are we doing and how do they access some of the services we have. So I focus on a couple of them. What we're looking to do is well, there's two programs we can talk about. One is around climate education, which is a paid for service that we're about to launch, but builds off our eco charter work that we've run for the last 10 years. That's a service that we're going to be selling to schools, and it will support them on their sort of net zero journey and how they can embed sustainability into schools. It's really interesting when you talk about price, because, as a charity, we want to make sure that people can access this information. That's what we're here to do. But at the same time, somebody needs to pay for it. And we found that it's quite challenging to get funding for that model. So what we've looked at and embedded over the last 3 or 4 years for that is that it's a paid for service from schools. But schools don't have a huge amount of excess spend. So we've always made it as lean as possible. But the model we're now, and that predominantly was a one-to-one service with our education manager sort of working with that school and going in. And we typically charged about £350 for that, for a year's membership, which isn't a lot. That's around, 1.5 days of somebody's time, really. So what we're looking at now is how we can upscale that service so it becomes a one-to-many, and using digital platforms to deliver that online course content. And so it'll be a cheaper price point for the schools, but we're hoping that we can have more schools accessing it. So that's a process that we're just going through at the moment.
If I can just ask you a bit more about that. So is that a service that you sell to the sort of the staff at the school to help the school to be more ecologically sound, rather than something you're delivering to the pupils?
Yeah, it's about enabling the teachers to give them the confidence to be able to talk about sustainability, and for them to be able to then take those lessons that they've learned into the classroom as well. So yeah, it's teacher to teacher training almost, but it's a whole school approach that we work through. And part of what we're looking at is how we can support the senior leadership teams in the schools, how we can support the governors, as well as the lesson plans for the individuals and the students. But we really see the eco charter, the framework that we have currently, is about that whole school approach and how that rolls out across the community of the school and wider as well. So the lessons that the children take home, which then feeds into our other work, so about improving recycling or improving biodiversity, you can set them challenges to do at home, which is obviously going to have a greater impact as well.
And from your own financial sustainability point of view, I really like the idea of the sort of one-to-many relationship, where you can still deliver the same valuable content, but charge it in a way that it's affordable for schools still, but you're going to see hopefully more revenue so that you can further develop the service. That's great.
Yeah. But it's a challenge. Let's say you pay a member of staff £35,000, and then you've got your own costs on top of that. That's £40,000 that you need to generate in an income. If we're talking about £100 per school, that's 400 schools that we need to be working with just to break even on that. That's a lot of work for 400 schools. So This isn't. I don't think this will be a surplus making by any means. It will hope, as long as it washes its face, then the charity will be happy. If I talk about one of those one of the other programs we deliver, which is called Investors in the Environment. So this is a business.
Great.
Yeah. So it's a business accreditation scheme that we deliver nationally. I think we've got around 350 members that are part of it. It's a paid for service. And it's a process that we've been running for the last 10 years. And there's 3 levels to it. There's bronze, silver, and green. At each stage, the business needs to sort of prove what they're doing and evidence their performance, and they get accredited for it. But over the last 10 years, we've gone through a range of different sort of business models for that investors in the environment, because it needs to cover its costs. Ideally, it should make enough that we can then invest back into an investor in environment model. But at the same time, we want to get this out to as many businesses as possible, because we want them to be making these sustainable changes within their businesses. And it's a brilliant way for us to have a big impact, because if we work with, let's say 10 households to reduce some of their energy through fuel poverty, whilst that's great, if we did the same sort of time and advice with a business, we can have a bigger impact on the carbon saving of that business. Both are important, but in terms of where we want to be making a big impact in terms of those big numbers for say carbon, businesses are one of those that we can really significantly work with. So the accreditation is there to support them, and not just through carbon, but waste and water, and their wider sort of environmental footprint. But that commercial model needs to be there for them as well. What's the price point? You don't want to undersell yourself, because there's a certain value to the expertise that the charity has and the team that deliver it. But at the same time, you don't want to charge too much, so that you're not getting the membership there. And the model has always been quite challenging in that, let's say for every 50 members, you need a member of the team. Well, when do you make that investment? Because you're not making a 50% return on that. If we can do a 10 or 15, 20%, that'd be great. But you still need to use that for investing in new training, new team members, new websites, etc. So it's still a very challenging business model to work forward. And then there's a lot of competition that's come onto the market now as well. So how competitive do we want to be as a charity against potentially other charities or other organisations as well? So, yeah, it's a moving feast for investors in the environment, and it's something that we're just working on for climate education. We don't know of many other sort of programs that are delivering that, so it's hard to then set your price point, because you're offering something that's a bit different to everybody else as well. So then you sort of have to.
It's a real kind of suck it and see with that one. The IIE accreditation scheme you've got, Investors in Environment, I think that's a genius name, just because the whole IIP investment in people thing is very well established and kind of known about. So I think the IIE is a very logical next sort of step in that.
Thank you. I'd like to take credit for it, but it wasn't me. It was a program that was already here before I joined. I think it was a former CEO called Hugh Cripps who came up with the name on that. But yeah, it does. And branding plays a really important part of that, in terms of that messaging, making sure that it's an identifiable sort of trademark and logo that people can go, I trust that. And that's the other thing. We spend a lot of time building up these programs, and they're built on sort of respect, but also loyalty, and people know what they're getting from them. So that you want to make sure that you're providing a constant level of service and giving the best that you can to those clients. But at the same time, not spending 5 days with a client when they're only paying for one. You've got to be quite commercially astute about what time you are spending on them as well. And probably one of the big things that when I came into the charity was that at the time the organisation wasn't doing timesheets, and so it was very difficult to work out where time was being spent and accurately how long things were taking to deliver on projects. Everyone's like, well, I'll roughly spend a couple of days here or there, but actually the timesheet information was fantastic in us working out where people were spending their time, and then it meant for future bids we could go, well, actually we put it in for that price, but it was twice as much. It cost twice as much. Now we know that we can make sure that we're putting in twice.
That is really interesting. Just one question I should have asked you earlier, but I didn't, is can you tell me how large a charity you are in terms of numbers of employees and revenues, if you're happy to share that?
Yeah, by all means. So we are roughly around about £1 million turnover most years. Some of that comes from some grant funding that we bring in and send out. So typically we're about between 15 to 25 employees, depending on the number of programs that we've got going on. But we also have a subsidiary company, which is called Green Energy Switch, which has about another 15 members of staff, and they gift aid their surplus to the profits to us each year as well, which is fantastic. As an organisation, we try to run the organisation at a break even. And so each of the projects should cover their costs, and some will make a surplus, some will make a loss, but the charity should break even. The money, the gift aid that comes from Green Energy Switch, to me and to the board, is very much of a, what can we do with this to improve impact? Where can we invest this to make a bigger impact? It shouldn't be that that's what's subsidising the charity as a whole. The charity should be able to wash its own face, and that's the cream or the cherry on top of the sundae, really.
Right. Now, I just want to highlight that you're the first person I've spoken to on this series of interviews who's mentioned timesheets, which I think is a genius. I mean, I use those in my business here. I've used them for years, and they really do help in terms of understanding how much you're spending, how much time you're spending on things, and therefore what the realistic pricing needs to be. I'd like to move on, if I may, with my next question is about asking you, what is the biggest barrier to future growth?
I think it's probably going to be the majority of people's response. It's recruitment. I think at the moment for us, having the skill set to grow, and we do brilliant at bringing people in and training them up, but we're seeing a number of larger contracts that potentially we could bid for, but actually we don't have the skills or the number of people in house to have that. So recruitment, and if you're looking for a net zero advisor or sustainability consultant, you're then competing with the big commercial organizations as well. And so, we really need to then play on the benefits of working for the third sector and for PECT, and, what we have. And retention, we're pretty good with retention. When people come, they tend to stay, they enjoy the work and the team, and that's great, but it's about getting them almost over the door and when they're here. So I think recruitment, and I've spoken to a couple of other environmental organizations recently, and it's the same for them as well, just finding good quality candidates that can work in the third sector, are passionate about it, and the salary isn't the only thing that they're considering. It's important that we're offering a good salary. It should be covering the cost of living, and we're a living wage employer, but we can't also we don't charge commercial rates, so therefore we can't pay necessarily the big expensive consultancy rates either. So.
Yeah, but it's such a worthwhile world to be working in at the moment. But as you say, there's a lot of competition out there for those sorts of skills.
Yeah.
Final question is, and this is this humanizing one for other people, it's really interesting to share the experience of one thing that's gone wrong recently, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, it's a really trivial one, but it has a knock-on impact, and that's around reputation. And we've just delivered a new training course, and we did it with a partner organisation, and the training course went well, and lots of positive feedback. But as part of that, we needed to issue certificates, and in this day and age, you'd have thought that most of these things would be electronic, but they weren't. We were sent paper certificates, which we then needed to send out to the candidates. The person who was sending them out put on the wrong postage, which meant that most of them didn't arrive. And then that had a real knock-on impact to our reputation, because people were expecting these things, they weren't, they were chasing, and then when we ordered some more certificates and they arrived, and then they had to be sent out, but they got rained on, so they were damp. And so it sounds trivial, but you want to be that professional, especially for a training sort of delivery. You want to be that professional organisation that they don't have to be chasing, and these things are done. But it just, nobody posts anything these days really, so they are, can't really blame somebody for putting the wrong stamp on. But it was just, that has a real impact on how people perceive your organisation right at the end of what might have been a fantastic training course, but it's just been let down by that little thing. And it's just, it's upsetting, a little bit frustrating. So
it's so often the little things that just eat up the time that you really don't have. And as you say, you spent all that effort on making the training course really professional, and then to end up with that, how frustrating.
Yeah, but but it's a lesson learned, and we'll make sure we put double the postage on next time. So it'll definitely get there.
Look, that's brilliant. I'd like to wrap up, if I may, by just asking, how can people find out more about you and the organisation?
You can head to the PECT website, so it's www.pect, so pect.org.uk, and we're on pretty much all the social media as well as LinkedIn. So you can search for PECT or Sustainable PECT, and you'll be able to find us and see the huge amount of projects that we work on and the impacts that we're having.
Stuart, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for speaking to me this morning.
You're welcome.
See you soon.